So you want litre sports bike performance but without the uncomfortable riding position. Well, you, my friend, are probably after a super naked, and so here we go with the most powerful nakeds from each of the major manufacturers, and naturally we're going in order of horsepower ascending. Kicking us off at 150 horsepower from its inline 4, we got the GSX1000 from Suzuki. Now, perhaps 150 horses doesn't quite make it into super naked territory, but for the money, it's still a lively, proven engine, a decent chassis as well, and in a thoroughly modern styling package that you'll probably either love or hate, but when I borrowed one for review, I did rather like it. Fast, fun, and relatively affordable, this one is certainly one to consider if you're on a budget. That said, it does look perhaps a little less tempting now in 2025, with the new kid on the block, the Honda CB1000 Hornet. This bike in its base spec makes around 150 horses peak, but with an exhaust control valve that opens up in the top half of the rev range, the SP version gets another 5 on top, making 155 horses peak at 11,000 RPM. That makes the Suzuki look a little tricky to justify, with the Hornet SP coming in about $2,000 cheaper, and so that's probably why Suzuki are currently running a promo in the UK at least, with £1,000 off a brand new GSX1000. But even still, with the Brembo style Emma brakes, the Öhlins shock at the rear, the 2017 Fireblade derived engine, and I think the more broadly palatable looks, the CB1000 is pretty much the default recommendation now for a rapid yet affordable naked. Now, before we get on to the next one, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to BIKESURE for supporting the channel and making videos like this one possible. BIKESURE are our insurance partners of choice, and so if you're looking to pick up a new naked bike this year, then I'd fully recommend heading to the BIKESURE website to get a quote. You see, they're a specialist motorcycle broker who work with up to 60 different bike-specific insurance schemes, and so they do all the legwork to get you the best possible cover. Not only that, but they aim to cover as wide a range of bikes as possible, from standard bikes to full-on customs to classics, imports and more. So whether you've got a bike that's a little out of the ordinary, or you've got a stock bike fresh out the dealer but you want solid, reliable cover, then do check out the link down in the description below where you can easily generate a quote with them. So once again, a massive thanks to BIKESURE for their support, and with that, on to the next bike. At another 8 horsepower more than the CB1000 Hornet, well, you could consider the Yamaha MT10. This one also comes in a base spec and an upgraded SP, both of which make 163.5 horsepower at 11,500 RPM. Now, whilst this one would typically cost you £14,320 in the UK, again, Yamaha are offering a couple of grand off this one at the moment, which really is quite a tasty offer. I guess one reason is probably the introduction of that exceptionally well-priced Hornet from Honda, but also you've got to consider that this engine isn't Euro 5 Plus compliant anymore, and so I assume they're getting rid of their 2024 stock before they discontinue it. There is, however, still one very good reason to consider picking one up that sets it apart from the Honda and the Suzuki, and that's the cross-plane inline-4 engine that gives it a distinctive power delivery and a beautiful note at the exhaust. So while a regular inline-4 is still fairly pleasing to the ear, well, Yamaha's CP4 might well be my favourite sounding engine ever produced. In fact, one of the few bikes that could run it close in that regard would be the Arilia Two V4, which just so happens to be the next bike up on this list. At 180 horsepower, I do think we've crossed the threshold into the super naked category, and that's, of course, reflected in the price, which is up over 16 grand for the standard bike and almost 19 grand for the flashy factory version. It's basically an RSV4 with flat bars and half the fairing removed, which I think makes for a pretty nice looking bike, but again, the acoustic side of things massively adds to the appeal of this bike. Just pipping it though by half a horsepower, Next up, we got the Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RS with 180.5 at 10,750 RPM. This one is unique in this market in that it uses their signature inline triple layout, which gives you typically more mid-range and torque than a 4, but also a bit more revvy fun than a twin, along with the distinctive sound which some riders absolutely love. For 2025, this model has been significantly upgraded with that new peak power figure, a slight improvement to the looks as well, and a big buff to the suspension package with Öhlins' latest and greatest Smart EC3 semi-active electronic system. The only downside, of course, is the price, which has really shot up since the last generation, although you could argue at £17,495, it is similar to the rest of the bikes in this part of the market. Like, for example, the KTM 1390 Super Ducati, which comes in at $17,999 for the standard version, or $19,599 for the Evo with the semi-active suspension. This one makes 188 horsepower at 10,000 RPM, and it's the only V-twin on this list, which means it makes dollops of torque for instant acceleration at almost any speed. This is truly one of the most leery bikes that I've ever ridden on the road, which is exactly what you'd expect from a KTM, and the only thing that might stop you buying one at the moment is the constant state of financial flux that KTM have been going through for the past few months, which still doesn't seem to be completely resolved. Still, to try and counter that, KTM recently announced some wide-ranging discounts across their lineup, which include £2,700 off both the Super Ducati and the Super Duke R Evo. Next up though, we're almost touching 200 horses with the Kawasaki ZH2, which makes 197 horsepower at 10,500 RPM. Now this one is another inline 4, so you might initially think it's a bit run-of-the-mill, but the way it generates such a strong peak power figure and yet at a relatively low point in the rev range is with forced induction courtesy of a supercharger as per the rest of the H2 lineup. That means you get more hearty torque figures and mid-range than some of the other inline 4s on this list, and so perhaps one to look at if you're a fan of that sort of engine character but don't necessarily want to be constantly chasing high revs. Plus, you get that supercharger chirp, which does help to give it a bit of its own distinctive character. Into the top 3 we go though, and with 208 horsepower up at 13,500 RPM, we've got the MV Agusta Brutali 1000s. These come in the relatively modest RS spec for £25,000, a more sporty and premium RR for £32,000, or, if you've got the cash, a top-notch RR Assen for £40,300. All of them get the same inline 4, which has a really aggressive rasp at the exhaust, out through those beautiful quad underseat pipes. The details on this bike are truly spectacular, with a level of flair and attention to detail that few bikes on this list will get close to, and so definitely one to consider for the aesthetically minded, providing you've got the pockets deep enough. In second place though, at 210 horsepower peak, we've got the M1000R from BMW, which is basically a super spec version of their S1000R Naked, with the shift cam variable valve timing and lift version of their inline 4 lifted from the S1000RR sports bike. That means it makes 45 more horsepower peak than the S1000R equivalent for 210 up at a revvy 13,750 RPM. Now at £19,990 starting price, this is definitely a premium motorcycle that won't be affordable to pretty much most bikers, but if you set it against the rest of their top spec M bikes, like the M1000XR Tall Rounder at £22,800 or the M1000RR Sports Bike at £32,850, well, it is, I guess, the cheapest of the bunch. The absolute king of the super nakeds though for 2025 could be said to be the Ducati Street Fighter V4, which comes in with a mind-boggling 214 horsepower at 13,500 RPM, and that rises to $226 if you fit the official Akropovic accessory track exhaust. Ducati spell this one out pretty clearly on their website with what they call their fight formula, with the Panigale V4's Desmo Sedici Stradale engine, the same top-spec chassis and technology pack, but just fitted with high and wide handlebars and minus the fairings, et voila, you've got yourself a rocket ship just that lets you sit up a bit. All I'll say is good luck hanging on, and as always, I'd love to know which bike you'd pick, so do let me know down in the comments below. If these are all out of budget though, then I'll put our pick of the best affordable middleweight nakeds on the screen now, so you can give that a watch in case you haven't already. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next video.